Good Erev Shabbos. Price gouging is an unethical business practice that takes place when a customer or customers are in desperate need of an item that is hard for them to otherwise get hold of. And the owner of the item in this situation charges much more than the market price, and the customer is forced to pay that exorbitant price because of the pressing need. And not only is it immoral to take advantage of someone in that situation, to act in this way, and to charge a person extra money, but it can also be illegal. For example, at the beginning of the pandemic, back in March, the public understood very little about the novel coronavirus and how it's transmitted. And all we knew was that the CDC and other health institutions were recommending not only social distancing, but use of hand soap and hand sanitizer and perhaps face masks designed for protection against these diseases, such as N95 masks. Now, the stay-at-home orders themselves led to some problems with availability of essential household items. Not only was there a run on the supermarkets with people packing them to maximum capacity and emptying the shelves, but there were certain items that just became almost impossible to come by, despite their importance. For example, toilet paper and paper towels were very hard to find. The items that were suggested to be used for protection against the virus, such as sanitizer and masks, not only became hard to find, but they were often subject to price gouging. Individual masks at that time could cost as much as $20. Containers of Clorox wipes could cost $50, and bottles of hand sanitizer were going for as much as $150. It was absolute madness for a while, and in response, in late March, the state legislature here in Massachusetts expanded the prohibition against price gouging, which previously only focused on gasoline, to also apply to medical supplies. In halacha, price gouging is already illegal for all movable items. Mishnah Bava Metzia describes the rules of the biblical prohibition of ona'ah, which applies to any case in which a seller charges a client more than 1/6 above the market price. And this is true regardless of the circumstance of the sale, whether it's during a time of great need or not. Ona'ah applies whether the person desperately needs the item or not. They can't be overcharged. If a seller were to violate this isser, if they were to charge more than 1/6 above the market price, then the buyer would have a right to invalidate the sale or demand back the value that they were overcharged. The Ran, Rabbeinu Nissim of Gerona, points out in one of his sermons in Rosh Hashanah that a case can be made that Yaakov Avinu was guilty of precisely this ethical and halachic violation of price gouging, of ona'ah. After all, Yaakov's brother Esav comes back from hunting and asks Yaakov for the lentil soup that he's making because he's exhausted and hungry. And instead of giving him the soup right away, Yaakov first demands that Esav give him his birthright, give him the Bechorah first. And Esav, evaluating himself to be in mortal danger, agrees. Vayomer Esav says, Hinei anochi holech lamut. Behold, I'm about to die. But what do I need a birthright for if I'm going to die anyway? So Esav feels that he's about to die of exhaustion and starvation, and Yaakov takes advantage of that situation. And in return for lentil soup, an obviously inexpensive, common item that just happened to be life-saving for Esav in that exact moment, Yaakov demands perhaps the most valuable thing that Esav had, which was his firstborn status. And the question is, the Ran asks, is how is that not gross abuse? A dishonest ethical failure on Yaakov's part. How is this not ona'ah? The commentators attempt a number of defenses of Yaakov's behavior. Some suggest that Yaakov actually paid much more money to Esav in addition to the soup. Another view is that Esav was not really in danger, and that when he said that he was going to die, he was expressing a fatalism about his profession as a hunter, that his father was likely to outlive him anyway because he would die young as a hunter. And if so, Esav was not really pressured into giving the birthright to Yaakov, and it's his own fault that he made such a poorly thought out deal. Others, such as Rabbi Dr. Aaron Levine, an expert in business ethics and halacha, argue that since Esau demonstrated himself to be totally uninterested in the responsibilities and benefits of the birthright, it was not price gouging for Yaakov to ask for it in return for what Esau actually wanted, which was the soup. And since there's no objective market value of a birthright, Esau's personal evaluation of the birthright of the Bechorah as worthless means that Onah simply did not apply in that circumstance. And finally, some say that since Esau was undeserving of the birthright and even self-described, he even described himself as not needing or not wanting the birthright, Yaakov was justified in using whatever leverage necessary to wrest it away from his brother and preserve his father and grandfather's legacy. Which of these explanations of Yaakov and Esau's behavior you choose could be very important for understanding something that happens a little bit later in the Parsha. Yitzchak, father of Esau and Yaakov, called Esau into to where he is as an old man, and he tells him to go hunt and prepare a delicious meal for him so that he can give Esau a blessing before he dies. Now, it might have been possible for us to separate this blessing from Esau's firstborn status, that maybe, Yitzchak was just talking about a bracha that had nothing to do with the sale that took place earlier between Esau and Yaakov, except that Esau himself explicitly ties them together. By Yomer, Esau says, Hachi kara shemo Yaakov. Of course, that's why his name is Yaakov. Vayakveni ze pamayim et bechorati lakach mine ata lakach birkati. That because Yaakov tricked me twice, he took my birthright, now he's taking my blessing. It seems that he's thinking of the two things as being connected. Esau explicitly says to his father that this blessing was meant to come along with his firstborn rights, and says that Yaakov has tricked him twice and he's taken them from him. And Yitzchak, though he's surprised that Yaakov tricked him into giving, tricked Yitzchak into giving him, Yaakov, the blessing first before Esau, Yitzchak still, though, does not seem to be so surprised to hear that this is the second time that Yaakov has taken the firstborn rights of Esau. And the question is, why is Yitzchak not surprised? Did they tell Yitzchak about it? Did Yitzchak know about the sale? And if they did tell Yitzchak about the sale, and he knew that Yaakov had purchased the Bechorah, why did Yitzchak try to give the firstborn blessing and the rights to Esau? Did he not consider it a legitimate sale? Did he think that it was ona'ah, that Yaakov really was violating this prohibition? What's going on? Now, if Yitzchak did not know that Esau was not living up to the legacy of their family, if he did not know Esau's true qualities, then it's understandable why he might have considered the transaction to be ona'ah. He would assume that Esau did value the Bechorah very highly, that Esau would never have made the sale unless he had no choice and he was really in danger. And in fact, Chazal say that Esau attempted to deceive his father about his illicit behavior, his illicit activity. The Torah says, "Vayahav Yitzchak et Esau kitzayid b'piv," that Yitzchak loved Esau because his game was in his mouth. And Rashi explains that Esau's game was a trick that he played on his father, that he would ask halachic questions about tithing to give the impression of piety while secretly engaging in deplorable behavior. And it's implied by Rashi that this trick maybe worked, that Yitzchak loved Esau because of this and was unaware of Esau's corruption. So if that's the case, then it would make sense that he thought it was ona'ah, and that's why he was trying to still give the firstborn rights to Esau. But there's also evidence that points toward the opposite. After all, when Yaakov disguises himself as his brother Esau, the sign that almost gives Yaakov away to Yitzchak, to his father, is the fact that he invokes God's name. And in other words, Yitzchak clearly does not expect Esau to do the same. He does not expect Esau to invoke God's name, and he does expect Yaakov to do so. So clearly, he doesn't think that that Esau is somebody who is living up to their legacy. He also seems not to be angry at Yaakov for taking the blessing and the firstborn status, and even reaffirms Yaakov as the true heir to his father Avram's legacy. Why would he do that if he thought that what Yaakov did was wrong and that he had unfairly taken advantage of his brother? The Bechor Shor writes that Yitzchak did know about the sale, and he did consider it legitimate, that Yaakov really did purchase the birthright. In fact, says Bechor Shor, that's why Yitzchak attempts to give Esav the Bechorah while he's still alive. That's why he says, I have to give you the blessing while I'm still alive before I die. Because he wants to give it as a gift and preempt Yaakov from getting it all as an inheritance when he dies. The sale was legitimate, so he has to give it as a gift before he dies so it doesn't become an inheritance. And the problem is, again, if Yitzchak knows about the sale, if he considers it valid, if he realizes that Esau does not value it and does not really deserve the inheritance, why does he try to give it to him? Why does the Torah say that Yitzchak loved Esau as opposed to Yaakov if he knew who Esau really was? Rabbi Shalom Rasner quotes the Pnei HaTorah as saying that Yitzchak did not show love for Esau despite Esau's failings or in blindness to them. To the contrary, Yitzchak showed Esau extra love because of those failings, because he believed in Esau's essential goodness no matter his behavior. He saw Esau's attempts to fool him by bringing up halachic questions, not as not as something terrible. He knew what Esau was doing, but he saw it as an opportunity to connect, and that made him show extra love to his son. He saw empathy with his son. He felt empathy with his son Esau over his selling of the firstborn rights, and he saw that as a means to keep him close. He was willing. He was willing to do whatever he could to keep his son close, to pull him back from the brink. He knew Yaakov was in the right, that there was no onah, that the sale was legitimate, that Yaakov was more deserving of it, but he realized that the ramifications of that sale could push Esau away from him and his family permanently, and he wanted to do everything he could to prevent that. Rabbi Rosner further quotes Rabbi Meir Premishlaner as taking this a step further. The Be'er Mayim Chaim, a Hasidic Rebbe in the 19th century, had a son who was not following in his footsteps. But instead of rejecting him, the Be'er Mayim Chaim tried his best to keep his son close and treat him well. He would daven to Hashem and he would say, please Hashem, show us compassion, like a father shows to a wayward son. And even if HaKadosh Baruch Hu, we turn away from you, please show us mercy, like I show to my son. Says Rav Premishlaner, says Rav Rosner, perhaps Yitzchak took a similar approach to Esau. That in fact, maybe it was precisely his relationship with Esau that made Yitzchak the most effective defendant of the Jewish people. The Gemara in Shabbos says that Hashem asked each of the forefathers to defend Israel from deserving destruction, but only Yitzchak said that he could do so. Like the Be'er Mayim Chaim, because of his son, his wayward son Esau, he was able to say, please show compassion to your children, the Jewish people, just like I showed to my son. Keep us close and preserve our share in your inheritance. In the Haftorah, the prophet quotes Hashem as saying that he rejected Esau. Halo ach Esav liYaakov no Hashem. Esau is Yaakov's brother, said Hashem. Yet I have accepted Yaakov. I have loved Yaakov, and I have rejected Esau. Rabbi Sachs points out that the Vilna Gaon insists that Hashem does not fully reject Esau, only the darkest aspects of his behavior and personality. In fact, the Torah commands us not to hate the descendants of Esau, the Edomites, because he is your brother, because Edomites are our brother. Rabbi Sachs explains that this is because the chosen status of the Jewish people does not mean that others must be rejected. But perhaps it's even more than that. Maybe the Torah is reflecting Yitzchak's attitude toward Esau, a deep faith that our brothers, our children, our fellow human beings have redeeming qualities and deserve to be loved even with their failings. They deserve, in most cases at least, our faith in them. Just as Luke Skywalker refused to give up on his father in Star Wars, Yitzchak refused to give up on his son. He believed that there was still good in Esau, that could and would eventually be brought out, and Yitzchak was determined to keep that good alive inside and not to reject his son. And this is an important lesson for us in education and in our relationships with other people, and particularly with in our families. There are situations where people test our patience, give us reason to reject them, to ascribe to them the worst possible motivations and character traits. But Yitzchak models for us a refusal to reject such a child, such a neighbor. If possible, it is better to try to maintain a connection, to maintain a shared reality, to show compassion. May Hashem give us the strength to follow our forefathers' example, and may He show us as much compassion and patience with us and bring us back close to Him. I want to wish you a good Shabbos and be safe. Do you listen?